Mist climbs the Smoky Mountains in the distance. The birds chirp, the crickets chatter. This geography, however beautiful, has created a form of isolation that has separated the mountain people from the comforts of technological innovations for generations. The people, because of this segregation, are as difficult to describe as the landscape. Simplistically honest, painstakingly diligent, sometimes deprived, but never dependent, these are the people of Coker Creek, Tennessee. In the Appalachian Mountains, sitting on the edge of East Tennessee, Coker Creek is a quaint, rustic mountain village where change doesn't come quickly. Since being settled by Scotch-Irish pioneers in the early 18th century, Coker Creek's rich and varied history is kept alive today by the descendants of those settlers. Many citizens of Coker Creek enjoy their seclusion. It is the last thread they have connecting them with those who have gone before. This mindset, coupled with the geographic limitations and low socioeconomic status of the region, propels the area into relative isolation. Today as in the past, the residents of Coker Creek are denied amenities that most of the country takes for granted. Easily accessed technologies like cell phones and DSL are not available in Coker Creek, and technological advancements, including the telephone, are far behind the rest of the nation. It was a long road from the introduction of telephones to their installation in virtually every home. The United States patent for the telephone was granted in 1876 to Alexander Graham Bell. Major cities were quick to install telephone lines, yet it would be several decades before the hills of Coker Creek would be introduced to this innovation.
Honey, we didn't know what a telephone was till me and Ken would take turns, staying with Aunt Eller when Oscar was on the mountain.
Hollywood's portrayal of the knowledge of telephones in mountain communities is very similar to tales told in Coker Creek.
Listen, I've got to call my office in Tulsa. Have you got a telephone?
A what?
A telephone? Well, maybe one of your neighbors has one. It's well, down in this country, it's probably a box attached to the wall. And you talk into it, and they can hear you in Tulsa.
Maybe you better sit down for a spell.
In 1925, Coker Creek resident Oscar Radford was hired by the United States Forest Service to put up the initial telephone lines from the nearby town of Tellico Plains to Wachee Mountain Fire Tower. Radford served as the fire warden at Wachee and used the telephone to report wildfires to the ranger station. He finished hanging these lines to trees on the side of the dirt roads, and the first telephone in Coker Creek was installed in his home in 1926. This phone had limited capabilities and could only call two places, the Wachee Fire Tower and the Tellico Ranger Station. The year the first phone was installed on the mountain, the Federal Communications Commission report stated that in 1926 there were 15 million telephones installed in the United States. In the cities of the U.S., people were dancing to Charleston during an economic boom. Charles Lindbergh was flying high in the spirit of St. Louis, and Henry Ford was mass-producing cars. But the continued isolation of Appalachia meant Coker Creek was not involved in these major events. The New South movement brought industrialization to much of Appalachia. These industries provided a need for an innovative communication device. The telephone building in Knoxville, Tennessee was less than 80 miles from Coker Creek. However, Coker Creek's industrialization was very limited. The stock market crash of 1929 left the United States reeling. President Roosevelt's answer to the failing economy was the New Deal, a series of programs designed to provide relief to the unemployed, reform of business and financial practices, and recovery of the economy. One aspect of this program was the Civilian Conservation Corps, or the CCC. The CCC had two main purposes. First, to provide employment and vocational training to the unemployed young men of the nation, and second, conservation of America's natural resources. There were about 70,000 CCC workers in Tennessee, and Coker Creek played host to several hundred at Camp Rolling Stone, a CCC camp in service from 1933 to 1942. This regiment's main goal was to add roads to the scarcely navigable conditions in Coker Creek. Oscar Radford, though still a Forest Service fire warden, was contracted to install additional governmental telephone lines in Coker Creek, but was paid with CCC funds. These telephones were property of the Forest Service, and in addition to connecting these men to the ranger station, the phones could be connected to the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. This was especially important for soldiers from Coker Creek fighting in World War II, as evidenced by the story of Coker Creek resident William George Shaw. He enlisted in the U.S. Army in September 1941, carrying this writing booklet that contained contact information for his family in the event of his injury or demise. As a resident of Coker Creek, the only way to contact his family via telephone was to call the Monroe County Jail. The jail could then route his call to one of the Forest Service phones in Coker Creek. This mountain community coped without telephones. Its citizens did not have extensive contact with the outside world, but they led active social lives within. They passed useful information around, even without the help of this innovative communication device.
You didn't have telephones. You just spread word by mouth, and one person would take it to the next.
The Federal Communications Commission reported 670,000 residential telephones were in use in 1956 in Tennessee. And that year, Coker Creek's residents were finally making their first call. The post-war boom of the 50s brought the gift of Teleco Telephone Company to Coker Creek.
I bought the company in November of 1954 with the understanding that I would assume operation January the 1st, 1955.
Certainly the telephone must have changed Coker Creek's citizens' day-to-day activities. Mamie Murphy moved to Coker Creek in 1934 and has lived there ever since. She owned a general store in the community and served 54 years as the United States Postmistress in Coker Creek. The addition of the telephone impacted and changed her business practices.
We used to go pick up the grocery orders, and after we got telephone, they could telephone their orders in. See, it saved everybody.
The telephone greatly improved life on the mountain. A fine example of this is a phone chain prayer line used by Longridge Baptist Church since 1984. It is used to pass on prayer requests, praise reports, and general church information. More than 50 families currently participate in the prayer line. Another example of positive change brought by the innovation is the use of a telephone fire alert system by Coker Creek Volunteer Fire Department.
We used a phone system that rang 10 different phones, and each individual had a call list to call so they could alert more firefighters.
An illustration of how this is beneficial is a story about a branch of the Shaw family in Coker Creek.
It was the summer of 1974, and we walked over to my grandmother's house to visit with her for a while. The lady from our church drove over and said that our house was on fire. The lady went down the road to call someone else because Mama didn't have a telephone. By the time the fire department came, our house was a total loss.
If this system had been an option, their home might have been salvaged. Today, the Volunteer Fire Department continues the use of the telephone fire alert system. The residents of Coker Creek have been positively changed in many ways by the telephone, but there is one negative change that worries the entire community. Their long-held tradition of face-to-face social interactions, known as visiting, have dramatically declined.
People don't visit like they used to. People would walk when they'd go anywhere. We had company all the time.
We used to go visit more and visit the sick, and now then we just use the telephone.
They quit visiting as much. They can get on the telephone and talk for 5 minutes and not have to drive down the road for a mile or 5 miles or walk as it was in the early days. The telephone gave you more time at home. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know.
The most important factor to Coker Creek regarding telephones is the landline. To this day, there is no cellular telephone service in Coker Creek, and the community depends solely on landlines to be able to communicate more fully with the outside world.
Folks from Coker Creek are the way things used to be. There was a seriousness, a sense of purpose.
Now, as in the past, change comes slow to the mountain, with or without telephones. The restrictive geography, Appalachian culture, and abject poverty continue to foster forms of isolation. Although the telephone brought unexpected change in the social patterns of those living there, it did not change the true essence of its people. Coker Creek is full of hard-working, honest people, and that is what defines this community.